Today, we're going to be looking at how The Boys, Amazon Prime's superhero series, is ultimately one of the most political and left-leaning shows on television, despite many right-wing folks claiming the series as their own, as well as the fact that despite its seeming critique of capitalism, the show is made by Amazon, one of the most capitalist companies ever to exist. So, oh boy, this video's not gonna be controversial at all.
Or you could take the blue pill. Or was it the red pill? Anyway, take the other pill and quit being a cunt.
Which pill do you want me to take?
In my last video about Amazon Prime's The Boys, which I released last week, we discussed how many right-wing people have misinterpreted The Boys, venerating characters like Homelander without recognizing that the Superman-esque hero was a critique of American imperialism, nationalism, and rampant corporatism that ultimately venerate masculine power and the unlimited usage of it for its own sake. How often fascistic interpretations of media generally come from only having the surface-level reading of a work of art, leading people to only see Homelander as a right-wing hero without realizing that the show itself was a criticism of that very shallow reading of media, with even the show going so far as to include the characters filming a Zack Snyder-style film in the show's narrative.
This new Joss rewrite really sings, huh?
When are you gonna stop torturing me?
Don't know what you're talking about.
That the show was heavily critiquing right-wing narratives around the show and character. Yet, despite all this, many in the right wing were even fine with this criticism of Homelander because they felt like The Boys was at least equal opportunity in its criticisms. It was going after the left and right equally, at least as they thought.
The Boys showrunner Eric Kripke claims that the white dudes standing next to you are the most dangerous people. I would say that that is definitely cause for concern. You'd have to be an idiot not to think so, but I also think that, there are elements that point to it quite literally poking fun at everyone.
They're very clearly lambasting both sides. Not sure what you're on about. The woke are no exception.
What are you talking about? Up until the Trump parody, it was poking at woke companies, pandering to people, and liberals eating it up. The most evil and greedy company going woke, talking about homosexual relationships and diversity? You pick up on that? The series is basically a parody of America. It pokes at both sides.
And it's easy to see why they thought this. I mean, the show makes fun of surface-level LGBTQ and women empowerment scenes in superhero media like Marvel movies. All those woke movies that the liberals love to eat up. I mean, The Boys is taking down the MCU, am I right? But is this actually true? Is The Boys really a show for both sides? Or is there something more going on? Well, let's dive deep into Bezos land. Oh boy, I don't like how I phrased that. To find out. But before we get to the fun of the rest of this video, I do want to take a minute to talk about something a little less fun. As I mentioned earlier, this video that you're currently watching is actually part one of a two-part series that I'm doing on the politics and themes of The Boys. And while you don't need to have watched part one, which focused on Homelander, to watch this video and understand it, it is sort of helpful. However, the problem is that while many of you have probably already seen part one, there are probably a good portion of you out there watching this video that can't even access part one of my video here on YouTube. That's because part one got hit with an age gate here on YouTube. Now, being open and honest, I kind of totally understand why that video got age-gated. That video did show clips from The Boys that were very gory, very over-the-top violent. I think I even accidentally had a video of Homelander's butt in that one, and it's a nice butt. I'll give him that. That being said, I did actually try to avoid the age gating on YouTube, uploading the video a few times to see what would trigger the age gate, and this version that did go live didn't trigger the age gate until after it went live a few days later, which kind of annoys me a little bit because I was intentionally trying to avoid it. But I'm not here to like poo-poo like, oh, I got an age gate on YouTube. I was trying to avoid it. It is frustrating. It is anger-inducing. But, I get it. It's partially on me. And also, an aside, I do wish to apologize to those of you out there who watched that video and were upset that I didn't give a warning on the video that there was going to be gore in there. I usually try to give those sort of content warnings beforehand. I forgot on that one. That's on me. I do apologize for that. That being said, I am very lucky that this does not affect my financial livelihood as it might affect other creators because of my patrons. So thank you to my patrons who do support me. Like legitimately, stuff like this would be much more devastating than otherwise if it wasn't for you, because you do help support me primarily financially, and I try not to even think about YouTube monetization all that much. So thank you to that. But my bigger issue is that stuff like this does affect the ability for videos to get seen. That's the whole point of why I do this as a job. And so I'm going to use this to be a little bit cynical and self-promoty, because I am actually very lucky and very thankful that I actually do have a outlet that allows my videos to get seen outside of YouTube, where we don't have to worry about age restriction and algorithm worries. And if you already know where I'm going with this, again, allow me the self-promotion. I am talking about Nebula. Most of you already know what Nebula is. It is a creator-owned streaming platform that I am building with a lot of my fellow creators like FD Signifier, Philosophy2, Mia Mulder, and a bunch of other really cool folks that allows us to put up videos that are free from YouTube censorship and algorithm worries. And just to say, part 1 of this video series is up there without any YouTube censorship at all. There's no blurring. You can see all of Homelander's butt if you want to. It's there for your viewing pleasure. On top of that, a version of this video that you're currently watching now is also up on Nebula, completely uncensored as well. Because while I'm hoping this video does not get age-gated, we shall see. But I'm hoping it's not going to be, because I am going to try to censor words like this one. It should be right there on screen for you, with words like orangey. Yes, it's going to be funny, it's going to be weird, but if you want the uncensored version, it is going to be over on Nebula. But moving beyond the age gate stuff, the folks at Nebula have actually asked me to share something further with all of you, and that is they are now offering Nebula classes, which are classes with top creators on Nebula's platform sharing their knowledge and expertise. You got classes from folks like Thomas Frank or Legal Eagle, and there's more and new classes dropping each week. And actually, personally, my personal favorite class on there is the ones from Georgia Dow, who many of you may know from her excellent Therapist React videos here on YouTube, including ones that she did on The Boys, which I absolutely loved. And also, like, her cosplays are amazing. But specifically, her Nebula class on dealing with mental health and anxiety have honestly been really soothing for me to watch, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for a great class on Nebula classes. Nebula classes are available for $10 a month or $100 a year, but you can sign up for the annual plan for only $80 a year if you use the link nebulaclasses.com/jessiegender, and the link should be in the description. And that gets you access not just to Nebula classes, but to all of Nebula. And if you are already a Nebula subscriber, then you can actually upgrade from that to the one with Nebula classes for just $5. So, long and short, Nebula classes are awesome. You get access to all of Nebula too if you sign up for them. And if you get on Nebula, you get my videos completely uncensored and unage restricted. I'm not getting naked for you. Don't think that that's going to happen. So thank you so much for indulging me the self-promotion about Nebula. And also thank you for Nebula Classes for sponsoring this video. And I hope that you continue to enjoy this mildly comically censored version of this video. So all that stuff out of the way, on with the show. So, as I mentioned earlier, there were some folks who believed, while still critiquing right-wing authoritarian tendencies with characters like Homelander, that the show was going after both sides equally. For example, in Season 2, the show featured a storyline about Hollywood with the Dawn of the Seven movie. One of the things, among many, that the storyline highlighted was the surface-level representation of women in superhero media and Hollywood. In the movie's filming, we see Vought give the women of the team the girls get it done superhero moment.
If we don't get that flash drive to the tower.
But how are you gonna get through all of them?
Don't worry. Girls get it done.
This sort of, yeah, girl power moment that echoes scenes in Marvel movies like Avengers Endgame, where all the girls lined up in a, yes, we're gonna beat the bad guy cause we're women, yeah, estrogen, isn't it great? We got boobs. We respect girls. Not enough to center them in a story or give them meaningful films until around 30 movies into our franchise, but yeah, women are powerful too. Even after Maeve came out as a lesbian within the show, the Vought team turned her LGBTQ identity into a product, showing her as a stand-up LGBTQ superhero who can represent the community. Oh, so wonderful. I feel so represented by moments like this.
I'm afraid to show the world who I am. Yeah? So who are you, Maeve? I'm a lot like you. I'm gay.
Moments like this quite literally presaged Marvel's very, very, very surface-level LGBTQ representation that we've seen throughout Phase 4 of the MCU.
Must have been would-be princesses, or perhaps another prince.
A bit of both.
Many right-wing folks saw this storyline as aligning with their criticism of woke culture in media and forced diversity ruining storylines in movies. That this storyline was somehow going after the SJWs who are ruining media with their political agenda. Many right-wing folks echoed this message in many of their discussions of pop culture media like Marvel or Star Trek or Star Wars.
For this sort of rainbow coalition that we have with the Eternals, I think it's important to note that they didn't start that way in the comic book. There was a lot of race swapping, gender swapping going on here with this cast. And again, there was really no explanation from Marvel, from the screenwriters, from head Kevin Feige about why they did this, other than for the sake of representation.
I've outlined this in other videos that you can check out on my channel, like the Matrix Resurrections video I did, or this one on it to get more specific. But to simplify those videos, it all comes from this worry of white replacement anxiety. These anti-SJW folks see marginalized people entering into media and taking more center stage, and these often white conservative men worry that they're being pushed out, despite many white men still having many roles and protagonist characters in TV and film. But what they point to justify their anxiety about all of this is the shallowness of these depictions, saying that these characters are often just here to fill out a quota of diversity because it makes these movies more marketable for studios like Marvel and Disney without actually having to do the work of authentic representation.
Disney Pixar's Lightyear, the Toy Story spin-off movie out Friday. Disney works to push a not-so-secret gay agenda, said Ben Shapiro. One would be forgiven for finding that to be a little bit too much and pushing things too far in what is a very tolerant society. But of course, this is a society of over-representation.
And they are absolutely correct in this. They are often just box-ticking representations in order to get people off their back for saying that we don't represent enough marginalized folks and think that it will make their movie better able to be sold around the United States, but without actually doing the work to try to do this authentically or let LGBTQ people take part in our own stories. And this is what the Dawn of the Seven storyline within The Boys is showcasing. What many of these anti-SJW folks will argue is that this shallowness should be justification to not actually do these representations at all. And they'll dog whistle about how marginalized folks need to be justified to be included in media or stories, whereas white people and especially white men can just be included as a matter of course.
The wokeness in Eternals is pretty heavy, and one of the most obvious ways that you're going to see that is the cast. The Eternals, these created guardians of mankind, come in all genders, colors, sexuality, and ability, which, if we had some explanation for that, might be fine. But we have no explanation for why the god Arashem decided to make one of the Eternals a deaf girl, why one is a child of indeterminate gender, why some are minority women, and there's no explanation given for that. And it's frustrating. As you watch the movie, you go, I don't understand. Why did he do this?
When the argument is that we shouldn't have to justify our existence in a story. Though aside, this Eternals example that I'm using here is doubly dumb because the whole point of the movie is that the eternal god was trying to influence humanity. So of course you send a diverse team, not a bunch of white dudes, to try to reach out to all cultures of the world. It highlights the American right wing's very narrow view of the world and thinking that it's mostly white when it's actually not. On top of this, they'll constantly allude to the simple inclusion of LGBTQ people as somehow not appropriate for kids.
Also, we have LGBT representation in this film. For the first time, it's quite overt. We have a gay, black, eternal superhero, Phastos, and he has a male partner and a child, and that actually features somewhat prominently in the movie. So that is a really big turn from Marvel, particularly given how much this franchise appeals to families. I think there's no doubt that there are some families who are going to forego this film because of that.
Showcasing how they constantly sexualize being LGBTQ instead of just something someone is, just as being straight is. It's no more sexual than a straight relationship is, nor is being transgender more sexual than being cisgender. Again, it's this constant selling of anxiety of the white straight male replacement by minority groups by arguing that it's all just this shallow representation caused by corporate hand-waving towards representation, that it's succumbing to the woke mob as justification for their arguments of white supremacy. When the actual argument is to actually do it better and more authentically. Not to do less, but to do more and better. In fact, the amazing Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies, who has worked really hard to include a lot of LGBTQ representation in his work that is authentic and actually part of the story, said this much more eloquently about Marvel's surface-level LGBTQ representation than I ever could.
Huge clanging warning bells are ringing as the giants rise up, as the with Netflix and Disney Plus especially. I think that's a very great worry where, Loki makes one reference to being bisexual once and everyone's like, oh my God, it's like a pansexual show. It's like one word. He said the word prince. And we're all meant to go, thank you, Disney. Aren't you marvelous? It's pathetic. It's a ridiculous, craven, feeble gesture towards the vital politics and the stories that should be told. So they will damn us with their condescension in the end. So that's my worry now.
And The Boys Season 2 didn't make that part overtly clear, but very clearly showcased it, with Season 2's final episode being about 3 girls beating the white supremacist superhero, showing women having actual agency in the climax of the show, not just the one-off moment off to the side.
Girls do get it done.
Yet, because that wasn't explicitly told within the same exact storyline, many on the right didn't read beyond the surface-level interpretation because, quite honestly, many of them haven't been given the analytical tools to do more than shadow media criticism. As a result, until Season 3, The Boys by many was seen more like South Park. Many people still argue that The Boys is like South Park, that it's taking aim at everyone and taking the piss out of the right and left equally.
The Boys is woke in the same way South Park is woke.
I really don't think this is woke, and I think everyone's concern is, somewhat justified, but I think take a step back and view it like you would South Park. I think it's just humour, satire.
And honestly, that's the problem with South Park, that it has always been a very libertarian-leaning series that has just been willing to target anyone outside of where they are on the political spectrum or how much power they actually have. But as a result, the show then ends up giving a false equivalency of power, that trans people, for example, are just as wrong for arguing about bathroom laws and fighting for our own human rights because we don't do it perfectly as Republicans are for continually enacting harmful rhetoric and denying human rights. It says these two things are equal when they're very clearly not. It's not saying that you can't make fun of trans people, but to say that trans people are just as wrong and actually have just as much power as people enacting human rights abuses is not the same. And so as a result, South Park never recognizes that power imbalance and as such plays into right-wing rhetoric that marginalized folks are equally wrong or racist for speaking out against their marginalization as white supremacists are for being racist, when those two things are not the same. Yet this is what right-wing rhetoric tries to sell The Boys as, especially in its first 2 seasons, saying it was just satire that went after everyone equally. It goes to what I spoke about in my first video, how many mainstream pop culture products made by corporations today ultimately dilute any meaningful message or worthwhile discussion to the point that all is left is these surface-level readings, resulting often in right-wing folks, especially those without the ability to read media critically, to only be able to garner surface-level interpretations from a work. In my last video, I spoke about how this removal of deeper critical reading of a work leads to veneration of masculine nationalistic power that has permeated cultural depictions of American protagonists and stories. But in this context, this cutting away of the veneer works so that the only satire these folks see is one that doesn't go further than the right versus left divide that they've been sold over and over and over again, without realizing that the quote-unquote wokeness they rail against is actually the product of corporations and is the same issue that many argue against as well beyond right versus left divisions. It's something I argue against as well, but that again, the argument isn't to tell stories only focused on white men or shallow tales without any meaning, which I don't even know how you would tell a story without any meaning behind it, but to tell deeper stories, more diverse stories, and ones that require more depth of understanding. Yet, The Boys is not like this, and we can contrast this very clearly with the character of A-Train, who in many ways is similar to Homelander. He's a man who was given powers by Vought and told to believe in his own strength, and became a part of the Seven, the biggest superhero team in the world. He similarly doesn't care about helping others, but only worries about his appearances, just like Homelander, as we see in episode 1 of the show as he cuts through Huey's girlfriend without care, and only worries how it will appear on the news if that gets out, not actually being concerned with the actual harm he caused and the person that he killed.
Hey, dude, are you okay?
Yet, the difference between A-Train and Homelander is that A-Train is a black man. He attempts to reach the same acceptance of his identity and use of personal power as Homelander, but he cannot access it because he does not have the same access to systemic power that Homelander does as a white man.
What the fuck? You just said everything was fine.
You're gonna have a whole year of parades, tribute concerts. You're gonna hit the talk show circuit. You're gonna have your own reality show on VOT Plus. The outpouring of love and gratitude is gonna be off the charts.
Oh, this is bullshit! You used to get my fucking coffee! Oh, fuck this. I'm not going.
Yet we constantly see him try to do so. A-Train even sells out Starlight to get Homelander's good graces, leading Homelander to kill one of Starlight's friends. On top of this, he also attempts to build up his brand by taking on the veneer of his community's struggles, but ultimately to venerate himself. He changes his costume to one representing more African colors. Even he makes commercials that utilize the veneer of Black Lives Matter movements, like a Pepsi commercial, but they're all about selling products and his brand rather than doing anything for the black community. And as a result, his community can see right through it, as represented by his brother, who says this.
For you. Don't say you did that for me. You've only ever been about yourself.
I'm sorry. I'll make it right.
How? Every time you try, you make it worse.
Eventually though, A-Train's brother pushes him to try to take on Blue Hawk, a superhero allegory of police brutality in America.
Since you want to be down with the cause so much.
I was walking home and this mugger came up behind me. I was terrified.
And that's when Dana Whitmire says Blue Hawk came to her rescue.
At approximately 7:15 p.m., I spotted a black male following the victim southbound on Marin Boulevard. I intercepted him, at which point the suspect became aggressive.
Brother lived a few houses up the street. 3 kids. He was just walking home from work. Blue Hawk curb stomped him so hard it cracked the pavement.
That's fucked up. Maybe I can throw his family some cash or something.
They don't need a handout. They need you to speak up. You're in the motherfucking 7.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, I'm Michael Jordan. I'm not Malcolm X.
Blue Hawk murders black men because he sees them as a threat and argues that black communities require more policing. Yet he's clearly there just because he's more allowed to use his full power against black men rather than in white communities. A-Train does try to work within the system of Vought to stop Blue Hawk, but Vought doesn't do anything systemic to stop him.
Little excessive.
Says who?
Well, a lot of black folks.
No, this has nothing to do with African Americans. You and me both trained with Coach Brink at school. We were taught to dominate, totally.
Yeah, but you're mostly just doing it in black neighborhoods. And you don't want people to say that you're being racist, right?
You know, it's actually racist to call somebody racist. What is this? Is this like a canceled thing? Am I being canceled? What can I do to make this right?
Wouldn't take much. I don't know, make an apology or some shit.
What a great idea. Thank you for saying that. I'm sure Homelander would really, really appreciate that, Blue Hawk.
Hey, name the time and place.
It is so important to do the work, to have the difficult conversations.
Vought just makes him try to give a surface level apology.
Well, he was a criminal.
He was unarmed.
Would you have done the same thing to a white guy in Mill Hill?
I go where the crime is, and the crime just happens to be in black neighborhoods. That's not my fault.
All right, you know, yeah, that's enough. Yeah, we're done here. Just say you're sorry and we can get out of here.
You know what? Do your research. Like, blacks commit a disproportionate number of murders.
How about all the black men you murdered?
How about you tell me why they were so fucking aggressive? I was acting in self-defense.
Powers, they don't.
Black Lives Matter. Fuck you, Blue Hawk. Walk away.
And after outcry from this, Blue Hawk uses this opportunity to say that he's being canceled, and it ultimately leads him to attack and almost kill A-Train's brother, something that he isn't punished for at all. As a result of all of this, A-Train finally realizes that he can't actually access any power within the system, and he starts to realize that he needs to take accountability for his actions. He ultimately earnestly apologizes to Huey for his actions, taking the first step towards accountability.
I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear? 'Cause I am. Okay? It's fucked up. Seeing somebody that you love get hurt like that. I'm sorry. I'm fucking sorry, Huey.
But now ultimately he kills Blue Hawk in anger. Yet it still distances him from his brother because that murder was still done for him, not for his community. But if we go back to my first video where I discussed the problem of right-wing surface-level understanding of media literacy, there were even some people that were like, Blue Hawk was right, he was just defending a woman who was being mugged, instead of recognizing that he is a man standing in for literal police brutality and over-policing of black neighborhoods, and how police often justify extra violence against black men compared to white folks.
We're seeing a white soup called Blue Hawk who patrols a black neighborhood as a cartoon villain. Oh, forget that he stopped a savage mugging. There is a victim here. Oh, because we're supposed to believe the black witnesses instead. Oh, it's the racist right, deferring blame on innocent Antifa. We're not going to get the suddenly Afrocentric A-Train confronting Blue Hawk and realizing he was in the right to take the fight to the hood. We're not going to see black on black crime thwarted by a white hero. That would actually be bold.
Here, this person argued that Blue Hawk was right to literally murder a black man. It ignores that even if there was a victim of a mugging here, the man didn't deserve to die, nor gruesomely murdered in the street. But this is how many police treat black men no matter the situation, and how the right almost always justifies extra use of power, especially on black men, after the fact. Always trying to find ways to justify that a black person deserved to die for a simple crime. Even more importantly, one woman says during Blue Hawk's press conference that the man that Blue Hawk killed was unarmed, which is entirely believable.
Yeah. Well, he was a criminal.
He was unarmed. Would you have done the same thing to a white guy in Mill Hill?
There have been numerous cases where police have used horrific violence, even murdering black men, when the person was actually unarmed and non-violent, just existing publicly as a black man. Many times black men are viewed as a threat simply for existing publicly, especially when in proximity to a white woman, who will sometimes use their status as white women to use patriarchal power in order to push out black men from public view. Oftentimes using the police by calling them in order to get them to use violence against a black man in order to quote-unquote protect her. We saw this very plainly a couple of years ago when we saw a Central Park woman using a panicked voice on the phone and calling the police simply for a black man being near her in a park, in a video that went viral.
Sorry, I'm in the Ramble, and there is a man, African American, he has a bicycle helmet. He is recording me and threatening me and my dog. There is an African American man, I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog. And my... I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. I'm being threatened by a man in the Ramble. Please send the cops immediately. I'm in Central Park in the Ramble. I don't know.
Thank you. Blue Hawk as a character represents the police's brutal use of power against black men in black communities, and the ways that the right wing often justifies violence against black men within their communities. By saying, oh, it's to protect the white woman, oh, it's because there's too much crime in black areas, it just happens to be where it is. When all of these are really just justifications for yielding violence against black men and black communities, and actively denying any accountability in doing so, as Blue Hawk does. Stories like this showcased how many right-wing folks began to slowly recognize in the third season of The Boys how the show was not just about taking the piss out of the right and left equally, but it was actually being targeted in its criticism of how systems like the police, who are agents of state power, uphold ones that place black men and other minorities as subservient, and see us as inherently political and need to justify our right to life and existence. How the right wing began to recognize this through the character of Blue Hawk, who is a character tailor-made to spout arguments they would agree with because he's a police officer that ultimately works to uphold this status quo that benefits them. And ultimately they sided with him instead of understanding that the show is asking us to look at the moral complexity of the situation a character like A-Train is in. A character who we are definitely not here to venerate or say is good, but who is slowly starting to recognize his place within a corporate system that ultimately works to keep the status quo of patriarchal and white supremacist worldviews and hierarchies. This is the distinction between A-Train and Homelander. The system was built to venerate Homelander's power as a white man, as America was built on white supremacist ideals that ultimately systemically helped him, while A-Train as a black man cannot. The Boys in Season 3 undercuts this possible South Park-like libertarian reading by making it clear that it's attacking the systems, not the individual, and as a result places criticism on the systems themselves and those who it produces, like Homelander. The show isn't about saying Trump bad. It's about expressing that the system that makes Trump would always make a Trump. It's the system that produces him that's bad. Now, as I wrap out this section on A-Train, it's important to note that I am a white woman talking about issues that affect the black community, and I really want to make sure that you actually hear about these issues from someone from that community. So I'm actually going to recommend that you check out Little Bill's excellent 2-part video series on The Boys as well that covers a lot of the same stuff that I've been covering in my 2 videos, as well as issues that affect the black community specifically too, and is able to give a much more interesting perspective on those ideas than I can. Yet, despite all this great criticism, what makes The Boys a genuinely excellent work is that it isn't as cynical as everyone thinks, because it offers a way out. It gives a counterbalance, a way to fight the system, through the team of The Boys. First and foremost, it's interesting that they're named The Boys, because the 2 leads, Huey and Butcher, in a way contrast Homelander. Butcher is another man who is a product of a desire to act out masculine power. Butcher is motivated in Season 1 to take down Homelander out of a desire to avenge his wife. His wife has been fridged, and so he feels emasculated. While he did care about his wife, his anger comes out of a need to have to avenge a woman. And this is how patriarchal masculinity is often pushed, that you need to protect the fragility of femininity, protect the white woman. Even in Season 2, when he learns his wife is actually alive, he still feels angry at Homelander because Butcher learns that Homelander sexually assaulted his wife, resulting in a child. Butcher, even then, cares less about what his wife wants, to live safely from Homelander's influence, but instead just wishes to lash out and get revenge on Homelander for defiling his wife. This ends up resulting in his wife's death again. It showcases how Butcher's need to constantly enact this revenge in the name of the white woman leads to others being harmed around him. And this, in many ways, mirrors Homelander himself. Butcher is isolating himself, pushing everyone else away in his quest to reaffirm his masculine power. But it's about himself and his revenge, not about changing a system. And we see this throughout Season 3, where Butcher takes Temporary V to give him the same exact powers as Homelander, acting out his power fantasy. He even pushes everyone on his team away from him because he feels he must protect them, distancing Huey, Frenchie, MM, and Starlight in the process, and allying himself with Soldier Boy to murder and kill his way to get what he wants. Huey, though, in contrast, represents the ability to break this path. On the surface, Huey in many ways reflects Butcher. He initially joins the Boys out of a misplaced sense of masculinity to protect others and avenge his dead, fridged girlfriend. Yet, he's also what we would call a typical beta male. He's not physically strong, is kind of emotional, and doesn't really have a typically masculine-coded job. He doesn't hold any real power. Yet, these qualities that are undervalued in this system are what actually make him stand out and make him a good person. For example, he chooses to work alongside Starlight, not put off by her being a woman with more power and strength than him.
You gonna stay over again tonight?
Dunno, it depends. You gonna bring Aquafresh?
I would brush with Monistat if it meant I could have sex with you.
It's very romantic. All right, I'll see you later.
Have a good day.
He's not emasculated by it, and also sees the power in working with others, in building a community against the individualism that he's told to embody, but which he's ultimately fighting against. Yet, in Season 3, Huey starts to feel that same disenfranchisement that Butcher and Homelander feel. He starts the season off working for a Democratic senator, believing that he can work within the system in order to change it.
You can give me a job.
You serious? What about your team?
Don't get me wrong, I still want to fight Vought. I want to do it the right way. Not covered in quite as many guts.
But then realizes that his boss also has powers and upholds the system as it is. She is quite literally Vought CEO's surrogate daughter and constantly helps him and is only out for her own strength.
A cleaning crew sterilized the site within 15 minutes of the incident. No witnesses have come forward, and if they do, we'll deal with them. The same way you dealt with Tony. Come on, sport. Haven't I always taken care of you?
This is very similar to how many Democrats today ultimately just keep on appeasing many right-wing groups. Democrats don't actually do anything demonstrably good, they just are basically a stopgap and constantly appease themselves to the right wing. They ultimately have no vested interest in trying to change the system because the system still gives them power. This is where The Boys succeeds where other superhero media has failed. As I pointed out in my last video on The Boys, the MCU tried to have this same criticism of systemic abuses of power in its Disney Plus show, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It tried to point out how the American system ultimately led to the radicalization of characters like Carly, who led the Flag Smashers, a radical group fighting back against the corporate and government abuse of power that was moving people without their consent, while simultaneously leaving them without resources or care. Yet, the show ultimately failed to address the actual problems because it first vilified Carly and the Flag Smashers by having them suddenly do evil out-of-character things for no reason in order to frame them as the antagonist. It then had Sam Wilson's Captain America simply tell the senators to do better.
The only power I have is that I believe we can do better. We can't demand that people step up and we don't meet them halfway. You control the banks. Shit, you can move borders. You can knock down a forest with the email. You can feed 1 million people with the phone call. You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up. Because if you don't, the next Carly will. And you don't want to see 2.0. People believed in her cause so much that they helped her defy the strongest governments in the world.
This ultimately ignored the fact that these senators will not do better because it's not just a failure of their viewpoint to help disenfranchise people like Carly, but actually to their benefit to do so. They are ultimately reaffirming their own power, and the system incentivizes them, rather than actually incentivizing them to change. Captain America yelling at them to do better won't change a damn thing, but leaves the MCU, one of the world's biggest media franchises made by one of the world's biggest corporations, Disney, to reaffirm the status quo as is, the one where it gets to remain on top. Yet, because The Boys is a deconstruction of these types of heroes rather than needing to constantly reaffirm the status quo as is so we can keep regurgitating the same heroes ad nauseum, the show can ultimately point out that the system itself is actually part of the problem. This is partially why The Boys can get away with these critiques despite being made by Amazon, because the show itself is deconstructionist rather than needing to reaffirm and perpetuate itself as the MCU does. There are also more reasons, but we'll get to that in a moment. And as a result, in the show, this leads Huey to feel powerless.
And you're bleeding.
I know, because I can't open a fucking jar because I can't do anything fucking right.
Huey. What's going on?
Vicky was my friend. I know her daughter. She surprised me in the office on my birthday. We used to roll through that office like we were the fucking untouchables. I thought things were finally going my way. God, what a goddamn joke I am.
Hey, that's not true.
Not only that, he begins to feel emasculated as less of a man. And as a result, he starts to disrespect Annie's power, believing that in order to be a strong man, he needs to save the girl.
Supposed to do?
You were supposed to call me.
Yeah, and what if you got hurt trying to save me, Annie? I would never forgive myself. But now you don't have to, okay? I can handle myself. I can finally save you for once.
I don't need you to save me, Huey. I need you.
He falls into the same trap as Homelander and Butcher, using temporary V to gain superpowers in order to enact that masculine power upon the world. But even when he does this, he still can't be the strong hero that Butcher or Homelander are. His superpowers themselves emasculate him, making him naked every single time he teleports, showcasing his vulnerability. But it's his vulnerability that is his power.
I was pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm not like Soldier Boy. That guy's full of shit. I mean, no one is that tough, and the people who say they are, they're lying. And I'm done.
Because eventually in the show's final episode, Huey decides not to use the Temp V to teleport in and save his girlfriend from Homelander, but trust Annie and power her up, which works, at least temporarily. It's his ability to trust, be vulnerable, and form a community that are what makes him powerful and able to fight back better against Homelander than people like Butcher are. It's not his strength and power as a masculine man, but his ability to trust. And like how Butcher is a reflection of Homelander, the Deep is a reflection of who Huey would be if he tried to become like Homelander. A deeply emasculated man who is used by those around him, but who still enacts toxically masculine ideals because he refuses to recognize that others around him helped him, refuses to even recognize that a woman helped him and helped him get to where he is, instead believing that he did it all himself, and yet still ultimately just being a second fiddle to Homelander and kind of a shitty dude.
I've given up a year of my life for you. I gave up my tenure at Vassar. I've propped you up. I have steered your comeback, and this is how you repay me?
You propped me up, huh? Right, you wrote a few lines. I'm the one how to fucking sell it.
Okay, let's see how well you do without me.
I'll be great without you. Without you overnoting me all the fucking time.
You're an idiot, Kevin.
Then why did Dave Eggers say I have a formidable intellect, huh? Formidable intellect!
Similarly, MM, Frenchie, Starlight, and Keiko are also worth mentioning in this video in this section. I'll keep it short here though, because this video is already overlong. But for example, MM wants to enact his revenge like Butcher, but is convinced to pull back on his toxic masculine desire for revenge by Starlight, realizing the importance of saving lives and protecting communities first and foremost.
MM, please, I need you. People are hurt. MM, please. He doesn't control you. We have to help these people. It's up to us.
MM in a way mirrors A-Train, a man who is better able to decouple his personal desire for revenge in order to utilize it for a greater community purpose. However, importantly with MM, the show doesn't shame him for being rightfully angry for how he has been treated, nor how his family was literally seen as disposable by Soldier Boy killing them, instead allowing him to healthily express that to his daughter and use that anger and not shame him or stereotyping him as the angry black man who just needs to learn to cool off.
Truth is, superheroes aren't always good. One of them, Soldier Boy, killed a lot of our family members a long time ago. It makes me sad. Sometimes it makes me mad when I think about it. But your granddaddy, he spent his entire life fighting to get justice.
Frenchie similarly feels emasculated by his inability to stop the Russian mob from controlling him and his past, but he can pull himself out of that through his relationship and trusting a woman's power rather than his own. Starlight and both realize their power this season as women, that they can choose to have agency instead of having a subservient place to men in both the corporate worlds or in how men have given them powers against their will. For example, Starlight initially chooses to work within the system of Vought to try and gain power over Homelander, but even that ultimately fails, and she chooses to work outside the system in order to bring him down, and it's ultimately the first knock against his actual power that we see throughout the entire season.
Most heroes don't care about you. They only care about their image, and Homelander is the worst of them. He's hurt people. He's done something to Maeve. I don't know what they're gonna do to me for telling the truth, but I'm going to keep doing it, and I should have done it sooner. I'm sorry. And one more thing. I'm not Starlight anymore. My name is Annie January, and I fucking quit.
Similarly, despite getting her dream of being cured of her powers, Kiko actually eventually chooses to take them back, because she realizes that it matters that it's her choice this time.
At first I hated the V because I didn't choose it. But now it's my choice. I think that matters.
All of this isn't to say, though, that the show is perfect. I do think there are some criticisms to be had of The Boys. There are some storytelling things here and there, but let's just talk symbolically, because that's kind of what we're focused on here. For example, I think Maeve as a character was ultimately highly sidelined by the series this season, and it's kind of frustrating considering that she's the show's one major LGBTQ character. And in the end of the season, she self-sacrifices herself, kind of becoming a bury your gays sort of thing. And it also feels weird that the show saves her life, yet writes her off anyways. She honestly should have died in this moment, given that she fell hundreds of stories and her powers were taken away. And maybe the series will justify her surviving this moment, but if I'm being honest, what it really feels like is the writers wrote that she lives because they realized that killing off their one prominent LGBTQ character would look bad and again be burying their gays. So again, the show isn't perfect in my mind, but I still love it because in the end of this season, the boys, the team, eschew a power structure that places Butcher and his revenge at the top, but one instead with a flat power structure where all of them have an equal say.
You need to double knot and bag your trash if you're gonna be working here.
Butcher isn't gonna like it.
Butcher can suck my shit. From now on, this is a democracy, huh? I say you one of the boys.
Me too.
They form a community that eschews power structures and male centering, which is seen as a positive contrast to Homelander's nationalistic individualist power for power's sake. All of this is why The Boys is such a robust political show, because it manages to keep its eye on how American nationalistic and white supremacist history has mixed with hypercapitalism to yield the result that we are now faced with, both in the show and the real world. A culture which reveres white patriarchal power and one that will consistently produce men like Homelander and Trump no matter what. And that the cure for this is to fight back as a community that respects all identities, not white men as the head of the team, but as part of the team. It's a very leftist show in that regard. Which makes it very weird, right, that Amazon makes it. A show critiquing hypercapitalism made by the most hypercapitalistic company ever. And a lot of people point to that very fact in order to delegitimize the show's message. But ultimately, this is the only way that this message could get out. We live in a capitalist system, so for this type of media to get made, it has to be made in a capitalist system. I feel like this criticism of the show ultimately kind of comes off as that one meme that you can't criticize capitalism because you live in capitalism and partake in capitalism. But what I do understand is people distrusting the show because it's made by a hyper-capitalist company. How can we reconcile this? Well, it's because we have to recognize that capitalism will try to sell you back anti-capitalism. Because, to do so, it makes you seem like you're fighting back when you're actually consuming, and it turns the catharsis the art creates into a feeling that you're fighting back without you actually doing so. Take Netflix's Squid Games, for example. It's an intensely anti-capitalist show. And if you don't believe that, by the way, check out this video. It's freaking amazing and explains why this show is super anti-capitalist. And the show was incredibly successful because it was appealing to people who are feeling all this anxiety under capitalism right now because capitalism sucks. But now, after its success, Netflix is making it into a perpetual series with a season 2 on the way and, I kid you not, a reality show based on it. Netflix saw Squid Games and said, yeah, let's do that. Unironically, it's going to just sell you back Squid Games over and over and over and over again because capitalism wants to create things that people will buy, and it knows that especially right now, people want anti-capitalism because they feel that anxiety that capitalism causes. So capitalism create products that sell that and make money doing so. And yet, all the while, you watch shows like Squid Games and The Boys and feel like, yeah, fuck this system. And you feel like you did your part when all you did was actually consume more. And if you want to know how anti-capitalism is sold in a capitalist society and how that system works, I'd recommend Andrewism's excellent video on it. But the funny thing is, The Boys itself is actually very aware of this very tense relationship that it has to its own production. Because we can look at how the show was marketed and how the show used its marketing. The episode of the show's third season, Herogasm, was sold as this significantly over-the-top, ridiculous episode.
Alright, we are so excited about this week's episode.
It's called Herogasm.
What happens at Herogasm, Karen? That's, okay, yeah, that's a lot. Fans, this is a big one.
The cast constantly put out like, this is the episode you have to watch. It's so crazy and over the top. But despite that, when I watched it, it was just the show has had much more violent and even crazier sexual imagery before this episode. But the show was sold on how crazy the was, highlighting our culture's puritanical feelings about sex. But it also speaks to how brilliant the show is, because Herogasm was also the episode with some of the most essential character beats and political moments. It's the episode where Starlight decides to balk the system, where A-Train kills Bluehawk, where Butcher and Huey take on Homelander. The show used the cynical marketing of Amazon's puritanical nature and capitalistic drive to get eyes on the episode that had the most to say. The show knows it's a capitalist product and uses that system to its benefit as best it can. As a result, I think The Boys is a great show. But it needs to be recognized that the feelings it instills are not supposed to be the end, but it should have you take those emotions that the show instills in order to push you to fight back in the real world, to work with others to create a community to fight back against the product of these systems like Homelander. Huey is the type of manhood that should be cultivated but is not rewarded by our current system. Our current system just rewards men who lust for more power like Homelander and creates them over and over and over again. And it turns men like Huey who seek to build a community to work alongside others instead of venerating themselves into disenfranchised beta males who are pushed to try to become alpha males by shoving down minorities around them. Instead of realizing that we're all allies together, that we are best when we recognize each other in our own power. When women, LGBTQ folks, and people of color, and white men and women are seen as influential in our own right, we build a community to fight back. That's what The Boys is all about. And if you don't understand that message, you're missing the point. Hello everybody, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to make it because I wanted to rant about The Boys for a while and I was very frustrated with so many people misinterpreting the message of the shows, but I'm gonna wrap it out there. One thing I will say, if you want to hear me talk more about The Boys, I actually was very lucky enough to talk to Jack Quaid, Huey himself, for an hour and a half. And while we talk about a bunch of things like Star Trek Lower Decks and video games, and he's a really cool dude, honestly, we did talk a lot about The Boys and the filming of episodes like Herogasm. So if you want to hear more about that, check out that video. Jack Quaid, absolutely wonderful human being. I adore him to death. He was absolutely wonderful to talk to. That's what I do here on this channel. I talk about LGBTQ and social and political issues through nerddoms and geekdoms and pop culture right here on this channel. And for those of you who have been waiting for it, the next big video on this channel is going to be my video on Matt Walsh's What is a Woman Part 2. Yes, the epic Part 2, where I guarantee you I will answer the question, what is a woman? Ooh, can a leftist do it? We'll soon find out. It'll be an interesting video, and it's honestly going to be a big and long one, so strap in. It's going to debunk the entirety of that film, and oh boy, a lot more too. So I hope you're excited for it and be looking for that within the next 2 to 3 weeks. It's gonna be a big one. I also, if you want to support me doing what I do, I have a Patreon that helps me, pay the bills and all that stuff because this is my full-time job. I also have a podcast called Jumpgate where I rewatch every episode of the wonderful show Babylon 5 with my friend Vera Wild. I am also on Twitter. I am also on Nebula. But beyond all of that, I just thank you so much for being here. I hope you're all taking care of yourself, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Hello there, patrons. Thank you all so much for supporting me. I could not do this. I could not pay my bills. I could not live. I could not be a weird, nerdy dork for you on camera without all of your support. So, thank you to all of you. I appreciate all of you. And with that said, an extra special thank you to Kathleen and Beth, Carrie Elrin Frost, Joe Herman Holt, Elysia Taitivi, Miranda Janelle, Lily Gray, Ashley Allenbo, Kiki Yo, Stephen Kleinard, Jem Shin, Ish the Mad, Mary the Mellow, Randy Thompson, Allie Gobert, Matt Chung, Super Desi, Wellington Marcus, D. Ray, Vincent Ellington, Boyd and Mary Bethel, Sylvester Rauta, Barbara Ruski, G. Man 42, Joseph Dewey, Felicia Toast, Chloe Dollar, Alex Miller, James Krivda, Elizabeth Christensen, Dominic Noble, Jennifer Fuss, Zone 1 Librarian, Andy with an I, Jessica Wright, Sean McKenzie, Sonia Nero Perdo, Lily's Hazel Eyes, Nathaniel Fraughton, Alicia Stice, Mag, Faranga Toe, Transit Toronto, Shield Maiden 4444, Wendell Zabizzle, Sasha M, Spencer Brownlee, Tangy Wilson, W, Randy E.D., Stephen Richardson, Spooky Heather, Sylvia, Drew Bach, Ulysses the Pagan, Carrie the Neuro Turtle, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Zoe Kerr, Melinda Walters, Fox E, Kevin Freitag, Willow B, Beatrix Purvis, Cyber Quaker, Casual Observer, Sean Piper, Martin J. Lower, Flynn, Lysa, Gretchen Badger, Meta Whisperer, Jedi, Indiana Jones. Epsilon is greater than, Silly Christie, Odd, Just Odd. Sarah Bystem, Sarah Leslie Hutchkins, Kay Liss, William Stewart, Sky Skinner, Patricia Cromptick, Becky Sparks, Blueberry Hill, Laura Demereau, Sarah Lemero, Hia Reeses, Nathan Steele, Blue, Troy Stull, Justine, Melody Ann Winters Good, Verdix Kai, Leotha Boyd, Geek, Filter, The Tipsy Changeling, Maeve, Zemlua Kincaid, Tony the DC Nerd, Jason Knott, Luna T, Strawberry Pup Tart, Holly Walters, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Celestial Dawn, Angie Pugh, Michael Godey, Abigail Marie, Kelly Davis, Bella Lugosi, James Hodge, Vale and Corey, honkin' in. Mwah to all of you. I adore you all. And again, thank you all for your support.